This is Steffen Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. Well, I'm back from New Hampshire covering the New Hampshire primary, and that was a terrific event. As you know, I spend time in New Hampshire. I have a second home there, so I'm very familiar with all the places and with the wonderful cafes and little diners, especially where the candidates and the media kind of mingled with local folks. And it was quite dynamic and quite active, not much less so than the Iowa caucuses were. A little different feel to it, but certainly an interesting event. Mitt Romney was the front runner. He was expected to actually win the New Hampshire primary. And the question was who will come in second. Of course, that was the thing that we were all trying to figure out. Well, we found out. We found out that Ron Paul did very well. I had predicted that. I have been following Ron Paul and his roughly 23% in primaries and caucuses. So what we were looking for in New Hampshire was not so much the winner, the front runner, because Mitt Romney has been the front runner for a long time. We were looking for two things. One, by how much would Mitt Romney win? Would it be 40% or more than 40%? If it was a lot less than that, let's say 35% or less, that would be a serious issue because this is his state. He's a neighbor. He's the homeboy, as somebody called him. I think it was Mr. Huntsman, Governor Huntsman. And it turns out, of course, he got over 39%. So Mitt Romney won New Hampshire elegantly with a strong front runner result. The second question was who would come in second. Everybody was, except Michelle Bachmann, of course, was in the race. The names on the ballot, there were actually 30 or 33 names on the Republican primary ballot, because New Hampshire is a state where if you qualify by birth, being an American citizen, I guess, and show an ID and pay $1,000, you can get on the ballot. So who would come in second? That was a serious question. Well, it could have been Huntsman. It could have been Ron Paul. Newt Gingrich was hoping to do well. And Rick Santorum was hoping to get a bounce out of Iowa, where he essentially came in first with Mitt Romney. The counting is still going on, in terms of the final results. It may be that Santorum actually had more votes in the Iowa caucuses in the end, and Rick Perry didn't compete in New Hampshire, so he was not much of a factor. As you know, Ron Paul came in second with a pretty strong 23% roughly. That was predictable because Ron Paul had the most enthusiastic supporters. They were at every street corner in both Concord and the big city of Manchester, New Hampshire. They were very enthusiastic, and he really does have a unique army of people who think that this is about more than just selecting someone to run for president. It's called, the Ron Paul Revolution. It's about shrinking the government. It's about getting the government out of people's lives. It's a very libertarian position. It's about freedom. He mentions that all the time. And at least for that percentage of people who, are enthusiastic about him, it is working extremely well. And Ron Paul continues. He goes to South Carolina. He's going to stay in the race. South Carolina now becomes a very different place. When we were in New Hampshire talking to people and so on, there was some discussion about how South Carolina would be different. South Carolina clearly is a different mix. South Carolina is a little bit more like Iowa. It's very conservative, very religiously conservative. There are fundamentalist Christians. There are evangelicals, and there is a very large African American population, which is the first state that has a significant minority population. Also, lots of Hispanics. They don't participate in the Republican primary because for the most part they are registered as Democrats. Um, but Mitt Romney's natural terrain was New Hampshire. He won Iowa, or came in tied for first in Iowa, and that was a significant accomplishment for him. But now the question is, even though he's ahead in the polls, can he prevent slippage? There are ads running against him in South Carolina that raise questions about his connection to Bain Capital and firing people and so on. South Carolina is different from Iowa and New Hampshire because it has a much higher unemployment rate. In fact, it's higher than the national average. Incomes are lower than in New Hampshire or Iowa. So the atmosphere surrounding a company that he managed that bought companies that were either troubled or that were easy to take over, fired a lot of people to make them more profitable, and then either sold them or in some cases shut them down basically, and walked away with a lot of money, is going to be sensitive in South Carolina. There isn't any question. I have a second home in South Carolina and have been going there for 4 years or more. I know the state pretty well, and it is very different from Iowa or New Hampshire. So what we're seeing now is Romney actually slipping in the polls. There was a report this morning that the trend line for him is downward in South Carolina. In Florida, the trend line is very strong. He's got a terrific lead in the polls in Florida. And so it could be that South Carolina is kind of a bump in the road on the way to Florida, where he'll do very well and where he may very well overwhelm the other candidates. He has a lot of money, and if he does really well in Florida, the question is, will anyone have enough money left and enough desire to continue with this? Certainly Rick Perry is doing very badly. I mean, Rick Perry is terrible in the polls in New Hampshire. He got almost no votes, not doing very well in South Carolina. So my view is that probably Rick Perry is going to be exiting. Ron Paul will continue. I think Ron Paul is going to skip Florida because it's a bad state for him. But he can go out to Nevada perhaps and do okay there. But then he's got to face Arizona, where Mitt Romney is way ahead in the polls again. So I'm sitting here in one of my offices, and this is my campaign research office in Ames, Iowa. And I'm looking ahead, and honestly, what I see is Mitt Romney. We have a Go Mitt over here on the side, which was from the last time he ran for president here in Iowa, where he didn't do so well. But I think Mitt Romney, it's his to lose. I think that he has the money and looks presidential. A lot of people view him as knowledgeable, moderate, and experienced. And frankly, I think it will be very difficult for anyone to stop him. And there is no one else going to get into the race, which would be the only other question. You know, if Jeb Bush got in, which he's not, if Chris Christie got in, which she's not, obviously. So I think right now in January of 2012, I can more or less say with confidence that I think Mitt Romney has got this thing almost wrapped up. There's a peculiarity in the cycle of primaries so that even if you won every single primary, you can't get enough delegates to actually have this wrapped up until, if I recall correctly, April, just because there aren't enough delegates up, even if you won all of them. So no matter what, we will see the campaign continue until someone, presumably Mitt Romney, has enough delegates accumulated, and then the campaign will sort of fizz out, and there will be, of course, primaries in other states, but there will be relatively little campaigning once the candidate has the magic number that he needs to get the nomination at the Republican convention in Tampa, Florida, in August of this year. Steffen Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.